Some stories don't begin with love. They begin with friendship too strong to stay ordinary. HI family, do you know if you subscribe to my channel, it will ginger me to do better and do more. Please subscribe before we continue. Thank you. Now let's continue. June never thought her life would be marked by the boy who lived across the street. But from the first day Sean offered her half of his melting ice cream on a blazing summer afternoon, something unexplainable tied them together. They weren't in love then. They were simply inseparable. Childhood had a way of making everything feel magical, and with Sean, every day became an adventure. June lived in a quiet neighborhood where bicycles lined the sidewalks and chalk drawings covered driveways like murals of innocent dreams. Sean was the kind of boy who carried a book under one arm and a slingshot in his pocket. Not because he liked trouble, but because he always wanted to be ready for anything. His parents had moved in 2 houses down when June was 7, and from that moment, her world became brighter. They went to the same elementary school, sat side by side during class, and traded secrets underneath the old oak tree at the corner of the park. Sean was the only one who knew June was afraid of the dark, and June was the only one who knew Sean wrote poems in a notebook he hid beneath his mattress. They had their differences, of course. June loved colors, sketching flowers in her notebooks, while Sean preferred words and stories. Sometimes, they would sit on her porch, June doodling while Sean read aloud from one of his books. They didn't notice it then, but the comfort of being together was slowly weaving a thread that would be hard to cut later in life. Their parents often joked about how the two were joined at the hip. On summer evenings, they'd run barefoot through sprinklers, their laughter filling the air. During school projects, they'd insist on being partners, working late into the evening until June's mother would call her inside. June and Sean had a rhythm, an unspoken language that made their friendship different from all the others. They were children, but even children can feel when something is more than ordinary. It was during one autumn afternoon that June realized how deeply she needed Sean around. She had scraped her knee on the pavement after tripping over a bicycle, and tears welled up in her eyes. Before her parents could rush to her, Sean was there, crouching beside her, using the edge of his sleeve to wipe away the dirt from her wound. "It'll heal, June," he told her softly, his voice carrying the calmness of someone far older. "I'll always help you." She clung to those words more than she admitted. As they grew older, their bond only deepened. In middle school, Sean defended June when a group of boys teased her about her oversized glasses, standing taller even though he was smaller than some of them. June, in turn, helped him rehearse his lines for the school play, even though Sean was nervous and shy about acting. They weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. They weren't in love. But their connection made others whisper, and sometimes even teachers gave knowing smiles when they saw them together. By the time they entered their teenage years, June had begun to notice subtle changes. Sean's voice grew deeper, his shoulders broader, and when he smiled at her, it did something strange to her chest. She brushed the feeling aside, reminding herself that Sean was her best friend. But at night, when she lay awake, she wondered what it would feel like if his hand lingered in hers just a little longer. Sean wasn't blind to the changes either. He noticed how June's hair caught the sunlight, how her laughter softened even his worst days, and how his world always felt incomplete when she wasn't near. Yet he never dared say anything. He didn't want to ruin what they had. That was the thing about childhood friendships. They carried a fragility that no one wanted to risk shattering. The turning point came one chilly winter evening. Their parents had gathered for a neighborhood bonfire, the kind where everyone brought marshmallows and hot cocoa. June and Sean sat a little apart from the others, sharing a blanket to keep warm. The fire flickered across June's face, casting her in shades of gold and shadow. Sean looked at her and realized, in a quiet ache, that she wasn't just his best friend anymore. He didn't say it. He couldn't. Instead, he poked at the fire with a stick and asked her if she thought they'd always be this close. June looked at him, her breath fogging in the cold air, and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't we be?" She believed it. She had no reason not to. But life had its way of changing promises. Months later, Sean's father received a new job in another state. The news hit like a storm. June felt her chest tighten when Sean told her. They sat on the same porch where they had spent countless evenings, and for the first time, silence pressed down between them heavier than words. "You're leaving?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Sean nodded, his eyes dim. "Dad says it's for the best. We'll only be a few hours away. We'll write. We'll call." June wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew distance was a thief that stole even the strongest bonds. The day the moving truck came, June stood on her front lawn, hugging her arms around herself. Sean walked over, carrying the same notebook where he wrote his poems. He pressed it into her hands. "Keep this for me," he said, "so you won't forget." Tears blurred her vision as she clutched it tightly. "I couldn't forget you even if I wanted to," she said. They hugged, the kind of hug that wasn't childish anymore, but desperate, lingering, filled with unspoken words they were both too young to say. Then Sean climbed into the car, and June watched as it drove away, the sight of his face disappearing with every turn. That night, June lay in her room, the notebook pressed against her chest. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt empty, the laughter gone, the rhythm broken. She told herself it wasn't goodbye forever. But somewhere deep inside, she knew her childhood had just ended, and her first love had taken a piece of her heart with him. Years passed, but the memory of Sean lingered in June's life like a song she couldn't stop humming. The notebook he had given her became her most guarded possession. She kept it in the drawer beside her bed, and on nights when the silence pressed too heavily, she would open it and run her fingers over his crooked handwriting. Some pages held half-finished poems. Others contained doodles in the margins, little sketches of stars, trees, and once, her name written in bold strokes like he had been practicing saying it aloud. She tried to move on. High school came with its whirlwind of new faces and responsibilities. June learned how to walk hallways filled with noise and laughter without feeling swallowed whole. She joined the art club, poured her emotions into colors and canvases, and told herself she didn't need Sean to feel complete. But deep down, she felt his absence in every corner of her world. Sometimes she caught herself laughing with her new friends and thought, Sean would have loved this joke. Other times, she'd glance at the boy sitting 2 rows ahead of her in class and imagine what Sean would look like now. Taller, older, maybe with the same determined set to his jaw. By her junior year, June was no longer the girl with oversized glasses and scraped knees. She had grown into herself, her beauty more obvious, her sketches admired by teachers and peers alike. People noticed her, but none of them made her heart race the way Sean once had. Letters came in the beginning. Sean had written her about his new school, the soccer team he joined, and the friends he was making. June replied, her pages filled with doodles and stories of her own. But slowly, the letters thinned, the phone calls grew less frequent, and before long, silence became their only communication. Life had a cruel way of pulling threads until even the strongest bond began to fray. June told herself it was normal. People grew apart. Childhood friendships didn't always survive the test of time. But no matter how much she repeated that, she couldn't let go of the hope that Sean would come back one day. Her parents noticed her change. Her mother often found her staring out of the window, lost in thought. "You're still thinking about him, aren't you?" she asked gently one evening. June smiled weakly, trying to brush it off. Just a little. Her father, more practical, would remind her that life moves forward. "You can't hold on to someone who's not here," he said, though even he softened when he saw the way her eyes clouded over. College brought another wave of change. June left her neighborhood, stepping into a new world filled with independence and responsibility. She studied fine arts, pouring her soul into her work. Professors praised her for her depth, her ability to capture raw emotion on canvas. What they didn't know was that much of that emotion came from the boy who had left her behind. At night, while others went out to parties, June stayed in her dorm, flipping through Sean's notebook. She had memorized his words, yet she read them over and over as though they might change, as though one day he might have hidden a secret message for her to discover. Sometimes she wondered if he ever thought of her, if he still had that slingshot in his pocket, or if he had given his poems to someone else. One spring afternoon, she walked across campus and saw a couple sitting under a tree, laughing as they shared a sketchbook. The boy leaned close, his hand brushing the girl's shoulder. It was such an ordinary scene, yet struck June deeply. That could have been her and Sean, if he had stayed, if life hadn't taken him away, if childhood promises had been strong enough to survive distance. She tried dating, more out of curiosity than desire. There was Oliver, the philosophy major who talked too much about himself, and Mason, the soccer player who made her laugh but never understood her silences. None of them lasted. None of them fit. June realized it wasn't that she couldn't find love. It was that a piece of her heart had never stopped belonging to Sean. And then, one ordinary afternoon that didn't feel ordinary at all, June's life shifted again. She had gone back to her hometown for spring break, walking the familiar streets she once biked down with Sean. The houses looked smaller now, the neighborhood quieter, yet nostalgia clung to every corner. She passed by the old oak tree where they used to share secrets and stopped, smiling sadly at the carvings on its trunk. That's when she heard a voice behind her. June! It was deep, older, but unmistakable. Her heart stopped. She turned, and there he was. Sean. Taller, broader, his boyish features sharpened into the face of a man. His hair was slightly messy, like he had just run his hand through it. And his eyes, those same eyes that once promised to always help her, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. For a moment, the years melted away. They weren't strangers standing on a quiet street. They were kids again, laughing under sprinklers, whispering secrets by the oak tree. June's breath caught in her throat, and all she could manage was his name. Sean. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, the kind that told her he had missed her just as much. I can't believe it's really you. She wanted to run to him, to hug him, to ask where he had been all these years, but her body froze, caught between the past and the present. The silence stretched, but in that silence, everything they had lost, and everything they might find again, hung in the air. Sean stood there, looking both familiar and completely new, and June's mind spun as she tried to process that he was really back. The neighborhood seemed to still around them. The rustling trees, the distant hum of cars, even the children's laughter somewhere down the street. All of it faded into the background. For years she had pictured this moment, rehearsed what she might say if they ever crossed paths again. But now that it was happening, her tongue felt heavy, her heart racing too fast for words to keep up. Sean took a hesitant step closer, his eyes searching hers as though to confirm she was real too. You look different, he said softly, a chuckle slipping past his lips. But it's you. It's really you. June's hand instinctively gripped the strap of her bag, grounding herself. She laughed nervously, the sound trembling at the edges. Well, it's been years. People change. Sean's smile softened. Not you. You're still. June. Something in the way he said her name made her chest tighten. She thought of all the times she had whispered his name when no one could hear, afraid it would slip from her memory. Yet here he was, speaking it back to her as though it had been resting on his tongue all this time. She wanted to ask him everything at once, why he never wrote back, why the call stopped, why he never came back sooner. But the words stuck behind the lump in her throat. Instead, she blurted the first thing that came to her mind. What are you doing here? Sean rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he still had when he was nervous. My family moved back. Dad retired, and Mom wanted to be closer to, well, to this place. It's home, you know. His eyes flicked toward the oak tree, the memories tied to it hanging thick in the air. And I guess I wanted to see it again. To see you. June's heart thudded in her chest. She didn't know whether to feel relief, joy, or the sharp sting of anger for all the years she had spent missing him. But the weight of his presence, the way he looked at her, made it impossible to cling to just one feeling. He had been gone, yes, but he was here now, and that meant something. Do you want to maybe take a walk? He asked, his voice carrying that same boyish hesitation that used to surface whenever he asked if she wanted to race bikes down the street or sneak an extra cookie from her mother's kitchen. June nodded, her lips curving into a cautious smile. Yeah, sure. They walked side by side down the familiar street, the distance between their shoulders close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, yet far enough that the years apart remained present like a quiet shadow. Neither of them spoke for a moment, as though trying to find the right place to start unraveling everything left unsaid. It was Sean who finally broke the silence. "I thought about you, a lot." June's breath caught, and she glanced at him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Then why did you stop writing?" The words tumbled out before she could soften them. Sean's expression shifted, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I didn't mean to. At first I tried, but then school got harder, life got busy, and every time I thought about reaching out, it felt like too much time had already passed. I thought maybe you'd moved on, that maybe you didn't need me anymore." June stopped walking, forcing him to pause too. Her voice was sharper now, trembling with years of bottled-up emotions. "Didn't need you? Sean, you were my best friend. I waited. I wrote letters you never answered. I stayed up nights wondering if you even remembered me. And you thought I didn't need you?" Sean's jaw tightened, his hands balling at his sides. "I was wrong," he admitted quietly. "I see that now." His honesty disarmed her anger, but it didn't erase the hurt. She turned her eyes to the cracked pavement beneath her feet, her voice dropping. "I missed you." Sean reached out, hesitating before letting his hand hover close to hers. "I missed you too, June. More than you know." The sincerity in his tone, the way his voice broke just slightly, sent a shiver through her. For a fleeting moment, she imagined taking his hand, letting all the years of distance dissolve into the comfort of his touch. But instead, she tucked her hands into her pockets, keeping the fragile space between them intact. They continued walking, the silence between them different now, heavier, filled with truths that had finally begun to surface. As they reached the end of the block, June stopped again, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Everything's different now," she murmured. "We're not kids anymore. We can't just pick up where we left off." Sean nodded, his gaze steady on her. "I know, but maybe we can start again." June's heart fluttered at his words, both with hope and fear. She didn't know if starting again was possible, if they could rebuild something that had been left in pieces for so long. Yet as she looked at Sean, older, changed, yet still carrying the same light that once made her world brighter, she felt a spark of the same warmth she thought she had lost forever. She didn't answer him right away. Instead, she smiled faintly and started walking again, letting him fall in a step beside her. For now, that was enough. For now, the fact that he was here, that they were walking the same path again, was enough. But deep inside, June knew this was only the beginning of something bigger, something that could either heal the past or break her heart all over again. June hadn't realized how fast her heart could still race until Sean walked back into her life. All afternoon, as they sat tucked away in the quiet cafe by the lake, the years between them seemed to bend and stretch, collapsing into moments that felt dangerously familiar. Yet the air wasn't light and carefree like it had been when they were children. It was charged now, heavy with everything left unsaid. The sunlight filtering through the tall windows painted golden streaks across Sean's face. He was different, broader shoulders, sharper jawline, eyes that looked older than they should. But there was something that hadn't changed, something she recognized instantly. It was in the way he watched her like she was the only person in the room, as if he had spent years memorizing her in absence. "You've changed," June said, trying to keep her tone even. Sean's lips quirked. "You haven't. Not where it counts." Her gaze drifted away to the world outside, where autumn leaves tumbled across the cobblestones. She wanted to disagree, to tell him she wasn't the same girl who once believed in promises made under starlight. That girl had been naive, quick to dream, slower to doubt. This June carried scars, carefully hidden beneath her calm, scars that made her wary of opening doors she wasn't sure she could close again. Yet here he was, prying open all those doors without even trying. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the clink of spoons and the hum of conversations around them. June's fingers tightened around her cup as the question she had buried for years slipped out. "Why didn't you write back?" Sean froze. His hand, mid-stir, lowered the spoon slowly as if handling glass. He set it down carefully before meeting her eyes. "I did," he said quietly. "At first, I wrote every week. Letters, pages long. Dozens of them. But you never replied. After a while, I thought," his voice caught, breaking in a way she had never heard before. "I thought you'd forgotten me." June's breath hitched. "I never got them." Sean's brows furrowed, the truth sinking in. All this time, he dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I thought I lost you because I cared too much, because maybe you didn't want me holding on. It nearly drove me insane, June. Waiting, hoping, then silence." Her chest ached. She imagined those letters, unopened, somewhere lost to time, each one a fragment of a boy who had tried to keep his promise. She clenched her hands together to stop them from trembling. "You really thought I could forget you?" Sean's gaze softened, but his jaw tightened as though containing a storm. He leaned forward, steady and unflinching. "Never for a moment. I thought you left me behind. But I never forgot you, June. Not for a single day." The words cracked something deep inside her. She remembered being 15, scribbling his name in notebooks. She remembered sitting by her window after his family moved, staring at the road and wishing he would run back to her one last time. She remembered crying in her pillow, muffling her sobs because she couldn't explain to anyone what it felt like to lose a piece of yourself. And now here he was, flesh and bone, saying the very words she had longed to hear. Her throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" Sean's eyes flickered to her lips before settling back on hers, steady and unwavering. "A chance. That's all I'm asking. Let me prove I didn't come back for nothing." The cafe around them faded, its clatter and chatter dissolving into static. June could feel the tension stretch between them, fragile yet electric, like a thread that might snap if she pulled too hard but would choke her if she let go. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to say yes, to let the years between them vanish, and step into a world where they were still the children who had promised forever. But life wasn't that simple anymore. They weren't those children. She had built walls around herself, and she wasn't sure she could bear the cost of letting him in again. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, almost to herself. "We're not the same people anymore." For a moment, pain flickered across Sean's face, raw and unguarded. But he didn't flinch away. Instead, he nodded slowly, like a man who had expected resistance but wasn't willing to give up. "Then let me learn who you are now," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "And let me show you who I've become. We don't have to rush. I don't want to rush. I just want to find you again." Her breath caught. The sincerity in his tone frightened her more than any careless flirtation could have. Because this wasn't just longing. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was a vow, unspoken but clear. Her cup sat untouched, cooling rapidly, but her hands refused to move. Instead, she studied him, searching for the boy she had once loved in the man sitting before her. She found traces, familiar sparks in his eyes, the same crooked tilt of his smile, the same way his voice softened when he said her name. But there was more now, a depth, a weight, and it scared her, because she could feel herself bending, breaking in places she had thought healed. Sean glanced at the clock on the cafe wall and cleared his throat. "Let me walk you home." June hesitated but nodded. The idea of lingering with him scared her almost as much as it comforted her. Outside, the evening air was crisp, the sky painted in fading shades of pink and gold. They walked side by side, close enough that their arms brushed now and then, each touch sending jolts through her like sparks from a frayed wire. Neither spoke for a while, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full, humming with everything neither dared say aloud. At a corner near her street, June slowed. "This is me." Sean stopped too, turning toward her. The street lamp above them flickered on, casting soft light across his face. For a heartbeat, it felt like time had folded over itself, like they were children again, lingering on doorsteps, stalling because neither wanted to say goodbye. June forced herself to meet his gaze. "Thank you for today." His eyes searched hers, lingering as though he wanted to say more. His hand twitched slightly at his side, as if fighting the urge to reach for her. But he only nodded. "Always, June." The words landed like a promise, simple yet heavy. She stepped back slowly, retreating toward her door. Her chest ached with the weight of everything unfinished, everything unspoken. Part of her wanted to turn back, to ask him to stay, to admit she wasn't as guarded as she pretended. But she didn't. Not tonight. Instead, she slipped inside, pressing her back to the door once it closed. Her heart pounded, wild and unsteady. Sean was back, and no matter how much she tried to deny it, she knew nothing about her life would remain the same. The night after seeing Sean again, June hardly slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed his words, his voice, the way he had looked at her beneath the glow of the street lamp. She tossed and turned, unable to quiet the storm inside her. By morning, she looked pale and distracted, though she tried to mask it with routine. At the office, her coworkers chattered about deadlines and weekend plans, but June's thoughts wandered elsewhere. She caught herself doodling on the corner of her notebook, absent-mindedly sketching a figure that suspiciously resembled Sean. With a quick scratch, she tore the page out and crumpled it into her bag, shaking her head as if the act could erase her heart's betrayal. When her phone buzzed around noon, she didn't need to look to know who it was. Somehow, she already knew the rhythm of his presence. Sean had texted, "Can I see you tonight? Just a walk. Nothing more." Her thumb hovered above the screen. She knew she should say no. She had already let him back in more than she intended. But her pulse quickened at the thought of seeing him again, and before she could talk herself out of it, she typed, "All right." By evening, the city was alive with its usual hum, but June felt like the world had slowed for her. She met Sean at the corner cafe, where he leaned against a lamppost, his hands shoved into the pockets of a dark wool jacket. He looked both casual and deliberate, like he belonged and yet was waiting only for her. "You came," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "I said I would," she replied, trying to sound nonchalant, though her pulse betrayed her. They walked together, their steps falling into rhythm with ease, as if their bodies remembered something their minds refused to admit. The streets glowed with shop signs and the faint shimmer of rain on pavement, lending everything a quiet magic. Sean pointed out small things. The street musician playing softly on the corner, the bakery that still smelled of warm bread at night, and June found herself laughing at moments, the sound startling even her. For a while, it was easy, almost too easy. But at the park, beneath the skeletal trees and the faint glimmer of stars, Sean's tone shifted. He slowed, glancing at her with that intensity that always unraveled her composure. "You haven't asked why I came back." June's breath caught. She had avoided the question deliberately, afraid of the answer. Now, with him so close, she couldn't escape it. "Why did you?" she asked softly. Sean stopped walking. His eyes searched hers, dark and earnest. "Because I couldn't keep living without trying one more time. I try to move on, June. I try to convince myself you were just a part of my past, that what we had was just childhood, but nothing worked. No matter where I went, no matter who I was with, it was always you. Always." Her chest tightened, and she looked away, her hands trembling at her sides. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" His voice was low but firm. "It's the truth. You deserve the truth." The intensity of his words pulled at something inside her she had buried years ago. But with it came fear. Fear of being vulnerable, of opening herself to pain she might not survive again. She stepped back slightly, folding her arms as though shielding herself. "Sean, life isn't the same as it was when we were kids. We can't just pick up where we left off." He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking until she could feel the warmth of him. "I don't want to pick up where we left off. I want to build something new, with who we are now, with all the years we've lived. Don't you see?" This, he gestured between them, his voice almost breaking. "It's still here. It never went away." Her heart pounded violently. She wanted to deny it, but the truth was in every glance, every brush of his arm against hers, every sleepless night replaying his voice in her head. It was still there. It had never left. June pressed her lips together, fighting the tears burning her eyes. "You don't know what you're asking. You don't know what I've been through, how much I've changed." "Then let me know," Sean said, his voice gentler now. Tell me everything. Let me in. I'm not afraid of who you are now, June. I just don't want to lose you again." The sincerity in his words struck her deeply, tearing down the walls she had so carefully built. For a moment, she let herself imagine it, letting him back in, allowing herself to be vulnerable again. The image was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. A sharp breeze rustled the trees, grounding her back to reality. She shook her head, taking a step back. "I need time," she whispered. Sean studied her, his jaw tightening as though restraining himself from pushing further. Then he nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." The finality of his words lingered between them as they resumed walking. Neither spoke, but the silence was not empty. It was filled with possibility, fear, and a dangerous tenderness. When Sean finally walked her back to her street, the air felt heavier than the night before. They paused again beneath the same street lamp, its light casting a halo around them. Sean's eyes softened as he looked at her, as though memorizing every detail. "Good night, June," he said, his voice low. "Good night, Sean." But as she turned to leave, her heart pulled back toward him, aching with everything unsaid. She didn't look back, but she knew, deep down she knew, that the fragile line she had been walking was breaking. That night, she didn't sleep either. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was hope, and hope was even more dangerous. The next few days unfolded with a strange rhythm for June. She went about her work, her errands, her routines, yet beneath everything pulsed the awareness that Sean was back. He hadn't pressed her after that night. He didn't flood her phone with messages or show up uninvited. Instead, he lingered at the edges, a steady presence without intrusion. She would catch glimpses of him when she least expected it, coming out of the bookstore across from her office, jogging along the same trail she used on Saturdays, waiting in line at the cafe she had frequented for years. Each time, their eyes would meet, and though words weren't exchanged, the connection deepened. But June wasn't the only one who noticed. One evening, as she sat on her couch, scrolling absently through her phone, her friend Anna called. Anna had a sharp intuition and a sharper tongue, and she wasted no time. "So, are you going to tell me why I keep hearing Sean Keaton's name floating around? Or do I have to drag it out of you?" June froze, gripping the phone tighter. "Who told you?" "Everyone," Anna replied, her voice laced with mock impatience. "Small town, Junie. Word travels. You two were inseparable once, remember? People see you walking together again, and they assume the universe is correcting itself." June let out a sigh. "It's not like that. Not yet. You just showed up. And how does that make you feel?" Anna asked, her tone softening. June pressed her lips together, struggling to put the chaos in her chest into words. "Confused, angry, hopeful. It's all tangled. Part of me wants to run the other way, and part of me doesn't ever want him to leave again." Anna hummed knowingly. "Sounds like the part of you that doesn't want him to leave is winning." June didn't answer, and Anna's silence on the other end was answer enough. A few days later, the quiet balance shattered when June's older brother, Matthew, showed up unannounced at her apartment. He leaned against her kitchen counter, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "So, I ran into Sean at the hardware store," he said casually, though his tone carried weight. June stiffened. "Oh." Matthew studied her, his gaze protective, as it had always been. "He said he's back for good, that he's trying to see where things go with you." Heat rushed to June's cheeks. "Did he really say that?" "Yeah, and I'll tell you this, June. I don't like it. Not because I think he's a bad person, but because I remember how broken you were when he left. You wrote him letters for months. You cried yourself to sleep. I don't want to watch that happen again." Her chest tightened at the memory, but she straightened her shoulders. "I'm not the same girl I was back then. I can handle it." Matthew's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Don't let him walk in and out of your life like a revolving door." "I won't," June said, though her voice was quieter than she intended. Later that week, she and Sean found themselves sitting together on a bench by the river, the golden hour painting the water in streaks of fire and gold. They hadn't planned to meet. It just happened, like so many of their encounters lately. Sean glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Your brother doesn't like me much. June turned to him, startled. You talked to Matthew? He nodded, a faint smile playing at his lips. He made it very clear, I don't get a second chance to hurt you. She sighed, rubbing her temples. I'm sorry. He can be protective. Sean shook his head. No, he's right. You deserve that kind of protection. I failed you once. I won't do it again. The conviction in his voice made her heart ache. She wanted to believe him, to lean into the promise he seemed to offer with every word, every glance. But doubt still lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the ripple of the water and the distant chatter of people walking the river path. Then Sean spoke again, quieter this time. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left? June turned her gaze to the horizon, her voice barely a whisper. All the time, the weight of those words settled between them, heavier than anything they had spoken before. Sean shifted closer, their shoulders brushing. He didn't take her hand, didn't push the fragile boundary she still held, but his nearness was enough to send her heart racing. Maybe we can't change the past, he said softly, but we can decide what happens now. June swallowed hard, her emotions a storm inside her. She wanted to answer, to give him the reassurance he sought, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she let the silence linger, filled with the possibility of everything unsaid. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, June realized the truth she had been avoiding. Sean wasn't just back in town. He was back at her life, weaving himself into her days and her thoughts. And no matter how much she tried to fight it, a part of her heart had already opened its door again. But with that realization came a warning her brother's voice had etched in her mind. Don't let him walk in and out of your life like a revolving door. June knew she stood on the edge of something dangerous, something that could heal her or shatter her beyond repair. And yet, for the first time in years, she didn't want to step back. June hadn't realized how quickly word would spread. It seemed like everywhere she went, people had opinions. At the grocery store, the cashier gave her a knowing smile. At the coffee shop, a woman she hadn't spoken to since high school leaned over and whispered, "So you and Sean Keaton, huh?" Some stories never end. Even at church on Sunday, she felt eyes following her, soft murmurs trailing in her wake. It wasn't malicious, just curious, just small-town chatter, but it wore on her. Each whispered comment dug into the wound she wasn't sure had healed yet. One afternoon, she met Anna at their favorite diner. The place hadn't changed in years. Same red vinyl booths, same clinking of silverware, same faint smell of fried onions. But Anna's eyes glittered with curiosity the moment June slid into the booth. So, when were you planning to tell me you and Sean are basically dating again? Anna asked, smirking as she stirred her iced tea. June groaned, sinking lower into the seat. We're not. We're just talking. Talking every day, walking by the river, sitting on benches like characters in a romance novel, Anna teased. Come on, Junie. Everyone can see it. June shook her head, trying to stay firm. I don't even know what this is yet. I don't know if I can trust him again. Anna's smirk faded into something softer. Then maybe it's time you figure that out. Either way, you can't live in the in-between forever. As if summoned by her words, Sean walked into the diner moments later. He spotted them instantly, his gaze landing on June with the warmth of someone who had been searching for her. He raised a hand in greeting, but before he could cross the room, another figure intercepted him. It was Noelle. June's chest tightened as she watched Noelle, once the girl who had sat 2 rows behind them in math class, now all polished edges and sharp smiles, rest a hand on Sean's arm. She leaned close, laughing at something he said, her touch lingering longer than necessary. Sean didn't pull away, though he looked slightly uncomfortable, and that was enough to make June's stomach knot. Anna glanced at her, eyebrows arched. You okay? June forced a smile. Fine. Totally fine. But she wasn't. Sean eventually came over, sliding into the booth beside her. He greeted Anna politely before turning his full attention to June. Hey, didn't know you'd be here. June kept her voice even. Small town. You always run into someone. Anna excused herself soon after, giving June a subtle squeeze on the shoulder as she left. When it was just the two of them, Sean leaned in, lowering his voice. You saw Noelle. I did. She's persistent, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. But I'm not interested. I haven't been, not since we were kids. June looked at him, trying to gauge his sincerity. Then why not tell her that? His jaw tightened. Because I don't want to make a scene. I thought it would fizzle out if I didn't give it energy. That's not how it works, June replied quietly. Sometimes silence is louder than words. The conversation left a heavy weight between them, one June couldn't shake even as they parted ways later that evening. Days passed and the tension grew. Sean tried harder, showing up at her doorstep with coffee, offering to fix a shelf in her apartment, inviting her to walk with him through the park. But every time, June found herself hesitating, the image of Noelle's hand on his arm replaying in her mind. Then came the breaking point. June was leaving her office late one evening when she spotted Sean across the street. He was talking to Noelle again, her laughter carrying easily through the quiet. From where June stood, it looked intimate, too intimate. Her chest ached, and before she could stop herself, she turned and walked the other way. Sean noticed too late. He called her name, his voice echoing across the empty street, but she didn't turn back. That night, June sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone as it buzzed with his calls. She couldn't bring herself to answer, because in that moment, all the old fears came rushing back. The night she had waited for letters that never came, the day she had told herself he'd return when he didn't, the years of silence that had stretched too long. And though Sean was here now, part of her wondered if history was beginning to repeat itself. June sat on the edge of her couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap as if she could squeeze all the nerves out of herself if she pressed hard enough. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tapping of rain that had just started outside, turning the city lights into blurred jewels behind the window. Sean stood near the door for a long moment, not saying anything, his tall figure outlined by the dim glow of the hallway lights spilling into the room. He looked like he was debating whether to leave or stay, whether he had made a mistake coming here at all. His eyes finally shifted to her, and in them June saw something she wasn't ready for, something raw, desperate, and unguarded. It wasn't the calm mask he usually wore, the controlled patience, the measured tone. No, tonight Sean was stripped of all of that, and the sight of it unsettled her, because she wasn't sure if she could match his honesty with her own. He stepped forward slowly, the floor creaking under his weight, and stopped when he was a few feet away from her. You've been avoiding me, he said quietly, his voice steady but edged with an ache that made her chest tighten. June swallowed hard. She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to say she'd been busy with work, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she looked down at her hands, her thumbs rubbing over each other in small, nervous circles. I've had a lot on my mind, she whispered. Sean exhaled sharply, not angry, but as though he'd been holding his breath too long. He moved closer and crouched slightly so he could see her face. June, I'm not asking you to give me an answer right now, but I need to know why you keep pushing me away. Every time I try to get closer, you shut me out. Did I do something? Did I cross a line? His eyes searched hers, his voice nearly breaking with the weight of his questions. June's heart pounded in her ears. She wanted to reach out and touch his hand, to reassure him, but her own fear anchored her in place. You didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice trembling. It's me. It's always me. I don't trust myself with this. Sean frowned slightly, tilting his head. With this? With us, June said quickly, finally lifting her gaze to his. Do you know how terrifying it is to feel something for you when I've spent years building walls so no one could get close enough to hurt me again? And then you walk back into my life, and it's like every wall crumbles in seconds. I don't know how to handle that, Sean. I don't know how to not be afraid. Silence stretched between them, heavy but alive with unspoken words. Sean finally lowered himself to sit beside her on the couch, leaving just enough distance that she didn't feel cornered. He leaned forward, his hands clasped loosely between his knees, as though grounding himself. June, he said softly, I've been afraid too. Do you think it was easy for me to come back? I didn't know what you'd say, if you'd even want to see me again. But I came because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Because no matter how far I went, You were always there in my mind. I'm not asking you to stop being afraid. I'm asking you to let me stand with you in it." June's throat tightened, her eyes stinging with tears she didn't want to shed. She hated crying in front of people. It made her feel exposed, weak. But Sean's words pulled something deep inside her, unraveling the knots she had tied around her heart. She shook her head slowly, fighting the emotions that threatened to spill over. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Every time I've let someone close, they've left. Or they've broken me. What if you do the same?" Sean turned toward her fully then, his expression intense but gentle. He lifted one hand, hesitated, then brushed his knuckles lightly against her cheek, a feather's touch that sent shivers through her. "Then let me prove to you that I won't. Not with promises I can't keep, not with words you've heard 1,000 times. Let me prove it with time, with presence, with every choice I make from here on. But you have to let me try, June. You have to let me in." A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it, and Sean caught it with his thumb, his touch lingering just long enough for her to feel the warmth of his skin. Her body trembled with the weight of everything: fear, hope, longing. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the scars of the past weren't easy to ignore. She leaned back slightly, pressing her palms to her eyes as if blocking him out would make the confusion disappear. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, her voice muffled. Sean didn't flinch, didn't withdraw. Instead, he leaned closer, his words quiet but firm. "Then let me help you figure it out. We don't have to have all the answers tonight. Just don't shut me out. Please." His plea hit her harder than anything else he had said. He wasn't demanding, he wasn't pressuring. He was simply asking to stay, to be allowed into the space she guarded so fiercely. Slowly, June lowered her hands and looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes were earnest, steady, but also filled with a vulnerability she hadn't seen in anyone for years. It disarmed her, melted something inside her that she had sworn would remain frozen. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Sean gave a small, almost sad smile. "Because you were never just someone from my past. You've always been the person I measured everyone else against. And no one ever came close." Her breath caught at his words, her heart aching with a mixture of hope and fear. She wanted to argue, to push him away again, but the truth was she felt the same. No one had ever measured up to Sean either. And now he was here, asking her to give him a chance. The rain outside grew heavier, a steady rhythm against the windows, as if the world itself was underscoring their silence. June finally exhaled a shaky breath and whispered, "I don't know how to do this." Sean leaned closer, his forehead brushing gently against hers. "We'll figure it out together." The simple contact, the warmth of his skin against hers, was enough to send her carefully built walls crashing down. For the first time in years, June allowed herself to close her eyes and just be resting in the moment, feeling the closeness of the boy who had once been her first love and was now the man fighting to be in her future. The rain had not stopped by the time Sean and June sat in silence, their foreheads still leaning against each other, breaths mingling in the quiet. Outside, the streetlights flickered against the heavy curtain of water, painting the room in soft shadows. June's chest rose and fell rapidly, her heart refusing to calm, and Sean's steady presence made her even more aware of how alive her fear and longing were, crashing inside her like waves. For a long moment, neither spoke, as though words would shatter the fragile space that had just opened between them. But then June pulled back slightly, her eyes glistening as she searched his face. "You say you want to prove it," she whispered, her voice uneven. "But how do you prove something like this? How do I know you won't change your mind tomorrow, or next month, or the moment someone better comes along?" Sean's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing not with anger, but with the sting of her doubt. He exhaled slowly, sitting back, though his hand lingered close enough that she could still feel his warmth. "If I wanted someone else, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have come back. Do you know how easy it would have been to stay away, to convince myself it was better not to risk this? But I didn't. I came because you matter to me, June. You always did." She bit her lip, her throat tightening. His words pressed against the rawest parts of her, forcing her to confront feelings she had tried to bury for years. She wanted to tell him that she believed him, that part of her always had, but the fear of giving in and losing him again gnawed at her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Instead, she rose from the couch, walking to the window. The rain blurred her reflection, but she could still see her own uncertain expression staring back at her. Behind her, she could hear Sean shifting, standing as well. "June," he said gently, "I'm not asking for guarantees. I know what I'm asking of you isn't easy. But I'm here, and I'll keep being here until you're ready to believe me. You don't have to give me an answer tonight." She turned slowly, her hair falling across her cheek, her eyes fixed on him. "But you want one," she said softly, almost accusing. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Of course I want one, but what I want more is honesty. If you're not ready, then don't force it. Just don't lie to me." The sincerity in his voice twisted something inside her, and she suddenly hated how much power he had to move her with so few words. She crossed her arms tightly, more to shield herself than anything else. "And if I can't give you anything? If I tell you I'll never be ready?" Sean's gaze held hers steadily, unwavering. "Then I'll respect that. I'll walk away if that's what you need. But you'll never be just another person I knew once. You'll always be more than that." June blinked rapidly, fighting the tears that burned at the back of her eyes. She turned back toward the window, pressing her palm lightly against the glass as if she could anchor herself to the rain. The truth was, she didn't want him to walk away. The very thought of it made her chest ache with a sharpness that frightened her. And maybe that was what scared her most, that wanting him meant giving him the power to hurt her in ways no one else could. She heard his footsteps approach slowly, and then felt his presence behind her. He didn't touch her, didn't force her to turn, but his voice came low and steady. "Do you remember that summer before I left?" June's breath caught. She did. She remembered it in flashes, in colors and sounds that felt like a dream sometimes. "When we used to sneak out and sit on the old bleachers at the high school," he continued. "You'd bring your notebooks and you'd pretend to study, but we'd just end up talking about everything else. That was the first place I realized I didn't just care about you. I was in love with you. And I've never forgotten it. Not once." June closed her eyes, the memory rushing back so vividly she could almost smell the grass and hear the crickets of those nights. She remembered the way Sean had laughed at her silly jokes, how his presence had made her feel braver than she ever admitted. She remembered watching him leave. That day he walked away without knowing he was taking a piece of her with him. Slowly, she turned to face him, her eyes wide and wet with unshed tears. "And you think saying all of that makes it easier for me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because it doesn't. It makes it worse, Sean. It makes me want things I promised myself I wouldn't want anymore." His gaze softened, and he reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her arm, waiting for permission. "Then maybe that's not a bad thing," he murmured. For a long moment, June stood frozen, staring at him, at the way his eyes never left hers, at the patience written into the lines of his face. Then, slowly, she let her arms fall to her sides. His hand closed the distance, resting gently on her arm, grounding her with a warmth that made her shiver. It wasn't an overwhelming touch, not a demand, but an offering. She exhaled shakily, her walls faltering, and whispered, "I don't know how to do this." Sean leaned closer, his voice barely above the rain. "Neither do I, but I want to learn with you." The vulnerability in his words cracked something open inside her, and before she could stop herself, she leaned into him, letting her forehead rest against his chest. For the first time in years, she let herself be held. Sean's arms wrapped around her carefully, as though she were something fragile, precious. He didn't push, didn't ask for more. He simply held her, steady and sure, while the storm raged outside. The world could have fallen apart beyond those walls, and she wouldn't have cared. In that moment, the weight she had carried for so long seemed to ease just a little, enough for her to breathe. Enough for her to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she could believe again. The storm had calmed by the next morning, though the air still held the thick dampness of the night before. June stirred in the half-light of dawn, her body curled on the couch where she had fallen asleep. The soft sound of the kettle whistling in the kitchen pulled her from the haze of uneasy dreams. She blinked, disoriented, until the memories of last night returned in waves. The confession, the tears, the fragile surrender when she allowed herself to lean into Sean's arms. She sat up abruptly, her heart racing as though waking alone had erased everything, as though it might have all been a cruel illusion. But then she saw him. Sean stood in the kitchen, his broad shoulders outlined by the morning light filtering through the thin curtains. He poured hot water into 2 mugs, his movements calm and unhurried, as though he belonged there, as though nothing about his presence needed explanation. June's throat tightened, a tangle of fear and longing rising in her chest. He glanced up and caught her staring, and a faint smile touched his lips, soft and unassuming. "Morning," he said simply. Her voice caught, so she only nodded, drawing her knees to her chest. He carried the mugs over and set one gently on the low table in front of her before sitting on the armchair opposite. The faint steam curled between them, and for a while they said nothing. The silence waited, but not suffocating. Finally, June spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You stayed." Sean looked at her steadily, his dark eyes calm but intent. "Of course I did." She swallowed, her hands tightening around the fabric of her pajama pants. "You didn't have to." "I know," he replied, his tone patient, unshaken. "But I wanted to." June lowered her gaze, staring at the tea she hadn't touched. "That's what scares me. Every time I start to believe in something, it disappears. People leave. Promises fade. I don't know if I can survive watching you walk away again." Sean leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Then don't think about me leaving. Think about me here. Right now. I can't promise you forever, June, nobody can. But I can promise you this. I'm not running. Not from you. Not from us." His words settled into her like a slow-burning flame, and though part of her resisted, another part, a deeper, quieter part, began to thaw. She lifted her eyes, searching his face, looking for any trace of hesitation, but found none. Only the steady certainty of someone who had made up his mind long before she had allowed herself to ask the question. For the rest of the morning, they lingered in the quiet. The rain had left the city muted, the streets outside glistening and still. Sean made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, clumsy but earnest, and June found herself laughing softly when he nearly burned the bread. The sound startled her, fragile and unfamiliar, as though she had forgotten what it felt like to laugh without forcing it. Sean glanced at her when he heard it, his eyes lighting with something that made her chest ache. It was both terrifying and intoxicating, the way he looked at her, as though she was something rare and irreplaceable. But the calm of the morning did not erase the storm inside her. When Sean left briefly in the afternoon to pick up a few things, June paced the apartment like a caged bird. Doubts pressed against her mind, whispering that this was only temporary, that Sean's patience would run out, that she was a fool to even entertain the idea of letting him back into her life. She sat at her desk, staring at the open notebook where she had once poured out her fears in shaky handwriting. Without thinking, she picked up a pen and began to write again. The words spilled from her, fragments of questions, confessions she couldn't yet say aloud, pieces of her heart she wasn't ready to hand over. By the time Sean returned, she had filled 3 pages, her hand trembling as she dropped the pen. She shoved the notebook closed just as he walked in, carrying grocery bags. "You okay?" he asked, setting the bags on the counter. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." He studied her for a moment, but didn't press, instead unpacking the groceries with an ease that unsettled her. How easily he slipped back into her life, as though the years apart were nothing more than a pause. That night, as the city lights glowed faintly through the window, they sat together on the couch again, but this time closer, their shoulders brushing. The proximity made June's skin tingle, every nerve attuned to the warmth radiating from him. Sean turned slightly, his voice low. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "If I hadn't come back," he said, If I'd stayed gone, would you have wanted me to? The question stole her breath. Her instinct was to deflect, to guard herself with sarcasm or silence. But the vulnerability in his tone disarmed her. She looked down, twisting her fingers together. I told myself I did. It was better that way. But her voice faltered, the truth clawing its way out despite her resistance. But I hated it. I hated waking up every day and pretending I didn't care. I hated missing you. I hated loving you when you weren't here to love me back. The words slipped free, raw and trembling, and June felt exposed, as though she had handed him the sharpest weapon to wound her with. But Sean didn't flinch. His hand reached for hers, slow and deliberate, and when his fingers intertwined with hers, his grip was steady. Then let's stop hating it, he murmured. Let's stop pretending. I don't want to waste another day pretending I don't love you. June's chest constricted, the tears she had held back all day spilling over. She shook her head, overwhelmed, but didn't pull away from his touch. You make it sound so simple, she whispered. Sean leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers again, their breaths mingling in the charged space between them. It is simple. It's terrifying, yes. Messy, yes. But the truth always is. And the truth is, June, I love you. I never stop. The final barrier inside her crumbled, and before she could stop herself, she closed the distance between them. Their lips met softly at first, tentative and searching, as though testing the weight of years carried in silence. But the moment deepened quickly, the kiss growing fiercer, more desperate, as though both were afraid the other might vanish if they let go. June clung to him, her hands gripping his shirt as though anchoring herself to something real, something solid. Sean's arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer, and for the first time in years, she felt the ache inside her ease. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't certain, but it was real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, June rested her head against his shoulder, her tears dampening his shirt. I'm still scared, she admitted, her voice muffled. Sean pressed a kiss to her hair, his embrace unwavering. So am I. But we'll face it, together. And for the first time, she let herself believe it. Not because he promised her forever, not because he swore he would never hurt her, but because in that moment, he chose her. And she chose him. And sometimes that was enough. The night stretched on, the world outside fading into silence. And inside that small apartment, June and Sean began again. Not with certainty, but with courage. The courage to risk, to hope, to love.